you do say upon your oaths that you find the defendant, Dale Warner, as to count 1, guilty of second-degree murder, as to count 2, guilty of tampering with evidence.
Our breaking news coverage continues right here on WTOL 11 Plus as Dale Warner has now been found guilty of second-degree murder and guilty of tampering with evidence in the death of his wife, Dee.
I'm Kaylee Marentet along with Jeff Smith. The jury just read their verdict within the last hour and a half. This has been a case 5 years in the making, and now many questions are finally getting answered. But some still remain. Yeah, we are being joined by a former judge and former assistant prosecutor to weigh in on this major case in just a moment, as well as a former police detective. But first, let's get right out to Melissa Andrews, who joins us from Lenawee County. Melissa, bring us up to speed.
Well, right now we are just seeing over my shoulder, Cheyenne, if you can get a shot of that, the defense attorneys for Dale Warner are just walking out of the courthouse now about an hour after that verdict was delivered. We have sent someone over there to get some sound with them so we can share their reaction to this verdict. Obviously a disappointment that their client, Dale Warner, was found guilty of second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. That verdict is also at the same time a disappointment for the family of Dee Warner, who was hoping that Dale Warner would get found guilty of premeditated first-degree murder. Now, we caught up with Greg Hardy, Dee's brother, outside of the courthouse right after the verdict and asked him how he felt now 5 years working toward justice for Dee.
It was hard to convince people, authorities included, that we knew what we knew, and so we just had to keep persisting until we could get enough people. And of course, as you know, the biggest part of that has been the public and their willingness to fight for Dee.
Now, Dee's 4 adult children all cried. They were very teary inside the courtroom as that verdict was read. Dale Warner showed no emotion, and he was led away in handcuffs, where he will return to the Lenawee County Jail. His sentencing is set for May 7th. And I just want to read a couple more notes here that I took with Greg Hardy. He says this has been a long time, a victory for his sister. Even though he is a little disappointed this was not a first-degree murder finding, he said Dale Warner is an atrocious piece of human trash, and it's impossible to conceive of how anyone can be that evil. He also said this is a day that we change the message from justice for Dee to victory for Dee. Reporting live in Lenawee County, Melissa Andrews, WTOL 11.
All right, thanks, Mel. Weighing in on this now, breaking news is former municipal judge Gary Byers, former assistant prosecutor David Harold, and former Toledo police detective James Trout.
Gentlemen, we've all led up to this point today, and Gary, you were able to join us during our 6 o'clock newscast tonight, even before that a little bit. But I wanted to start off today talking a little bit about the uphill battle that the prosecution had to try to achieve that first-degree murder case and why it was such an uphill battle.
Yeah, in order to be first-degree murder in Michigan, it's my understanding that you had to show prior design and calculation. And that's a tough level to show. You have to show planning and actions in furtherance of that planning. They had, I think, from what I could tell, this was a domestic violence case that went south where it ended up in a homicide. Those happen immediately in the moment, and it's more likely, and I think the jury thought that that was reasonably what happened rather than the pre-calculation. They was planning this for weeks and then finally executed her.
Let me ask from a police standpoint, as you look at this case and even on the investigations that you've been on in your time, when do you say to a legal team, I don't think you've got everything you need to prove X or Y? Or do those conversations ever happen?
Well, the conversation comes up primarily based on experience, especially, and ironically, Mr. Byers, Gary Byers, and I worked together many years on when he was with Lucas County. But you develop a knack for knowing what you need as far as evidentiary value. It takes a certain degree of probable cause to be able to pursue a particular case, and it's particularly murder cases have a higher standard of proof, of course.
Professor Harold, I want to ask you, the big thing in this case was determining if Dale Warner is going to be found guilty of first-degree premeditated murder, which comes with a mandatory life sentence, or second-degree murder, where he still faces life, but with the possibility of parole. From your point of view, what do you think about this verdict in those two decisions?
Well, in that regard, we have to defer to the jury. They're the ones that watched everything day in, day out, and they felt that second-degree murder matched better with the facts that were presented than first, much like Judge Byers had mentioned. So they're the ones that we have to defer to in that regard. And again, with the first-degree murder with no possibility of parole, and here there is parole eligibility, though in Michigan, most second-degree murders, the underlying, I guess you want to call it the minimum sentence in that regard, normally varies between 20 and 30 years.
I want to get each of you to chime in on something that Greg Hardy said during our interviews post hearing the verdict, and he said he truly believes without social media, without the public's involvement in all of this, it would still be a cold case to this day. So I wonder the public element in all of this. How does that play a role? Gary, I'll start with you.
Well, however you get there, you get there. And obviously, this took years to get there. People were volunteering and looking for Dee's remains. The fact that they got there through social media and ultimately the investigation, the police ultimately did good work. They got search warrants, they did what they had to do, and found her in that tank. That is, however you get there, it's the way that they had to go. And if it works, it works.
Yeah. Social media can be a problem as well sometimes.
Well, in this regard, social media drew attention to the case, and not that there had been any end in the investigation, but the more leads that you get, social media allows the public that sees something and they don't know that could possibly be evidence, and it allows them to reach out a lot easier to law enforcement in that regard. And we're finding that social media is aiding in a lot of cold case homicides, or at least older homicides and other crimes in that regard.
When it came down to it, he had created this tomb on his property, but you had months and months, Tony, of people scouring Lenawee County, scouring parts of southeast Michigan, trying to find any sign of Dee Warner. So I wonder, when you put out the call to the public to help, because we did it as early as last night. There was a missing 12-year-old. She was found today.
Right.
But the public call for help goes out again and again. How much of a role does that play in cases?
I've always said throughout my years of investigation, you never underestimate the assistance of the public input. Sometimes people figure, well, it's not a big enough information that I got, but we would take anything people got to help us along. Yeah. Every small bit of information can be a very good.
You don't know if you don't know, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you were a detective for 30 years, so
yes.
I'm sure even you watching the evolution of people picking up steam on social media. Social media hasn't been around for 30 years. Would you more so get tips? Is that or calls?
I'm from the school of hard knocks. Knocking on doors, and plus the evolution of scientific developments, and like DNA and so forth. Yeah. It makes a big difference. Social media does play a tremendous benefit, though.
We went into the weekend not knowing, and we talked to you last week. Gary, we may have mentioned it with you as well. There was some uncertainty with the jury pool, I should say, because you had an emergency with one of the jurors, goes away. They reconvened yesterday. We didn't know if there was going to be a mistrial. You were pretty adamantly opposed to the mistrial notion on Friday. Why did you think that they would come back and be able to get going once again?
Well, mistrial was premature. I mean, had this absence occurred for a longer period of time, if that juror would not have been able to come back, then mistrial would certainly be on the table.
Or if they would have had to have gone with 11 jurors decided upon, right?
Correct. And Michigan does have that option where the state and defense can agree to having 11 jurors. But in that regard, it was just the idea that it was a little premature. I mean, we wouldn't think anything of it if it was, with a 4 or 5 day break in the trial if it was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, for example, or around the 4th of July holiday. That would just be accepted. And in this regard, just we all have lives, and sometimes emergencies happen. We don't plan them. And in this regard, the juror had an emergency. It was rectified by today, and deliberation was able to continue to a verdict.
I want to go back, Tony and Gary. I want to give both of you, Kaylee, I'm sorry to jump in, but I want to dive in more to the premeditation part of this, because as we started off talking about an uphill battle, but this turned into a crime of passion more than anything else. Bad marriage, yes. Was it premeditated? That couldn't be proven in a court of law. But when you're trying to look at a case like this, husband, wife, issues, all of a sudden one of them ends up dead, for God's sakes. And how do you as a police detective start putting the clues together? What clues are you looking for?
We look at prior police reports, if any, or we look at maybe neighbors may have some input, might have heard loud noises, screams or whatever. Sometimes children are confronted in school, because of behavior issues.
But they had children on the stand. They had family members who said they were fighting, there was screaming, there was yelling. Why was that not enough?
Well, we got the test of sufficient probable cause as well, too. You got to make sure you have just enough to take it a little bit further.
Yeah.
And Jim and I have worked on cases like this before, but it's you are
same kind of elements.
Well, similar through the years, but the problem is you're limited as to all of the evidence. You can't show similar acts in order to show conformity in a particular instance, this case. So they were able to get in some of the evidence relating to that, but the rules of evidence, and I assume it's similar in Michigan, under Rule 403, is that you can't show similar acts in order to show conformity with this time. So it gets complicated, believe it or not, when you're talking which evidence, and that's why you have to work with the law enforcement officer that's the investigator, so you can put it all together and hopefully present it to the jury without error.
Yes.
Gary, you said at 6 o'clock, I would love to get your input on this as well. You said that an appeal is pretty much guaranteed in this case, and we are waiting for sentencing that's happening Thursday, May 7th at 8:15 in the morning. But what comes next? When could we expect that appeal?
Yeah, after the sentencing, then they'll have a period of time that they can file what's called a notice of appeal, and then they'll have a briefing schedule that will be laid out. And there are technicalities in every trial, especially one that goes 3 weeks, that there are going to be issues that they can argue in the Court of Appeals that certain rules of evidence were not followed, or there was an abuse of discretion, or whatever. And those are the types of things the defense will focus on.
David, were you going to get David's input as well?
Yeah, if you want to have an input on this, where do you
Please
see
agree.
this going?
No.
No, I mean, Judge Byers is right. They'll have 30 days to file a notice of appeal after we talked about a final appealable order, which will occur at sentencing. And then there are a whole host of issues that after you reviewed the transcript, because part of the time will be in the preparing of the transcript, that the defense attorney will look over and then select issues that they believe are salient. Could be traditionally you do sufficiency or manifest weight of the evidence, which after a trial is pretty standard. And Judge Byers mentioned different evidentiary decisions in that regard. So the sentence in that regard, if the tampering with evidence is run consecutively with murder two, those are all issues that could be appealed.
You've been retired as a detective for how long?
17 years now. But I still do private. I'm currently involved in private investigations, and I've been doing that for 12, 13 years.
I wanted to ask you
pyramid investigations.
I wanted to ask you specifically because for me, and I don't know how much of the case or the trial you watched, there was one wow moment. The prosecution was showing a videotape, showing some drone footage as investigators were on the scene of the farm property, and they showed what they said was Dale moving a piece of equipment around while the investigators were right there in front of them. It was one of those bold moments that they were trying to lay out. I wonder if you've had those wow moments where, quote-unquote criminals have done things right in your purview, right in front of you.
That's my red flag. Those are the,
Well, whose wouldn't it be,
yeah, those
right?
are the opportunities I jump on. I seize upon those opportunities. I try to keep an eye out for those, and I think any prudent investigator would.
Yeah,
Yes.
but those things happen.
Yes, indeed.
Is it criminals being smart or is it criminals being stupid?
I think the act of human nature. You know, we're gonna have our faults, and that's what helps us along.
A wow moment for you as you watch this unfold.
The law is nothing but common sense made difficult. And, you know, I thought the prosecution did a nice job laying out a commonsensical argument that made sense to the jury.
Yeah. David?
Oh, the same. I think that the prosecution in this regard did an outstanding job of for a circumstantial case, making it understandable to the jury. And I think a trial is made up of many small moments when taken together,
Yes.
make a larger picture. We had talked earlier about the idea of putting together a puzzle, and I think in that
Yes.
regard, the prosecution did an excellent job of assembling the pieces of the puzzle to where the jury had a true understanding of what happened.
Absolutely.
Does a defense attorney feel defeated after this?
Sure, no one likes to lose, but, you know, you got the evidence that you got, and they can only do so much.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, they tried to point out inconsistencies. They followed the game plan that they had planned on throughout the trial, and I don't think they should be ashamed.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Judge Byers, thank you so much. David Harold and James Trout, retired detective, 17 years now, still very active in the community. Thank you so much for being a part of our discussion and the insight into what has been a fascinating case to watch this unfold. Before we go, we do want to recap just a bit. It took the jury about 8 hours over 2 days to find a verdict. Dale Warner guilty of second-degree murder of Dee Warner and guilty of tampering with evidence, putting her body inside that fertilizer tank where it was hidden for 2 years.
Sentencing for Dale Warner is Thursday, May 7th at 8:15 a.m. in Lenawee County. If he were convicted of first-degree murder, Warner could have gotten a life sentence with no parole possibility. Second degree, there is a possibility of parole, but again, he is still facing life in prison with that second-degree charge. And tampering with evidence conviction is 10 years. But Dale Warner is 57 years old. It's quite possible he could spend most, if not all, of his remaining years in prison. Don't forget, you can see how this case all unfolded from the beginning right now by streaming Hidden in Plain Sight, the disappearance and discovery of Dee Warner, anytime on WTOL 11+. 11 Investigates sat down with Dee's family and broke down the entire investigation in our special 30-minute presentation.
We appreciate you spending some time with us here on WTOL 11+. That'll do it for us tonight. Make sure to follow us on all of your favorite social media platforms. And of course, if you don't have it already, which I think you do, but tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your family to download our free WTOL 11 News app.